Transforming the world starts here. It starts with her, with him, with them. There are many brilliant young minds with the potential to transform our world for the better. But not everyone has access to the opportunities that unlock their talent. What if every child had the tools they needed to solve problems in their own communities? Our mission is to inspire leadership and innovation in youth from all nations by empowering them through education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, also known as STEM. With First Global, any student can bring their imagination to the table and receive the tools to make their vision a reality. We accomplish this by hosting the First Global Challenge, an annual Olympic-style international robotics competition. One team of youth from each country builds and programs a robot to compete in a game themed around an issue of global importance. But more than scoring points, these athletes score invaluable life skills by cooperating on alliances, surpassing cultural, geographic, and linguistic barriers to achieve their goals. We're bringing the same passion and energy of sports to the field, but using it to inspire generations of high school-age students all over the globe to think creatively, problem-solve collaboratively, and lead collectively. In doing so, we're creating the changemakers who will work together to solve the challenges of an ever-evolving world in need of solutions. And is there a greater future than one created by ingenious young minds united for a better tomorrow?
Hello and good evening. My name is Tim Dodds, and it is my undeniable honor to welcome you to DAR Constitution Hall for the inaugural and 2017 First Global Challenge. "157 teams in 6 continents in total, but all coming together and convening as one. In the course of the next 3 days, these students, scientists, leaders, learners, dreamers, and believers abound will come together and cooperate on this grandest of international stages in robotics. It's very interesting to see how these teams interact with one another. These three were able to galvanize and gear up for the long road ahead in terms of competition.
Inspiration is a two-way street. I believe students that have managed to do what you've done are inspiring all the people that are here to help you do it.
Indeed, the end of just the beginning. Thank you so much for joining us here. Go out into the world and do good. Coming from DAR Constitution Hall, and on behalf of First Global and the inaugural First Global Challenge, this is Tim Dodds. Thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next year in Mexico City. Thank you.
Our experience in the First Global Challenge have been amazing. You do like a world tour every day. So you have people from all corners of the world. You have many cultures to exchange and definitely so much to learn.
Helping each other. And then we learned a lot of things like cooperation and teamwork and leadership. Yeah, I learned a lot.
We've had some really fun games. It's been so fun getting to work with so many different countries. I think that you really get a sense of kind of like the culture of each country when you go into their pit or when you get to work with the people from there.
This event, this whole thing, First Global, is amazing because it really inspires people to actually help clean up the environment and contribute to reducing the pollution that we have in our oceans.
I love robotics, and I think that First Global is a very good association.
Okay, we're about to start all three tracks. If you need to go to the other track, it's in a breakout room. You can go, or you can stay here for FGC track. So Melody, you can take over.
Hi, I'm Melody, and I'm a part of FTC Team 8565 TechnicBots, and I'll be hosting the FGC track. So I just wanted to remind you guys that we will be having 2 giveaway drawings during this track. So make sure to add your team number at the end of your participant name. The first drawing is going to be in the middle of all of our presentations, and then there's going to be one at the end of the track. The first drawing is going to be for participants, and then the last drawing is going to be for those who ask questions to the presenters. If an audience member is drawn, they must be present to receive their prize. So our first speakers are going to be from Team Zimbabwe. They are the first global challenge team for Team Zimbabwe, and they've been participating in FGC for a few years now. So we can have them present.
Melody, should I show the
Yes,
presentation?
Byron can go ahead then.
Sounds good.
Okay, so before Byron starts, just give us some context. Team Zimbabwe team has been getting on and off a lot in the last hour. So its network is a limitation for them. And it's also night to them, 10 p.m. I know their mentors, their team captain and stuff. A few people actually been up and down, in and out a lot. So we just get things going. We did have this backup with their slides here. So Byron will cover to explain for them.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate that Team Zimbabwe has been having these Wi-Fi issues, but we can present their slides. So Malvern was going to present this, but since he's not available, I'm Byron. Yeah, let me turn on my camera. And I'm from 8565 or Team USA. And this is just a brief history of First Global Challenge that both us and Team Zimbabwe participated in. Okay, so First Global Challenge is sort of like it's sort of like the Olympics for FIRST as an organization. So just like the Olympics, every single country has a team that's selected, and usually it's a team that's already involved in robotics in some way. So for example, I think Team Zimbabwe has been, the same group has been the first global team for a couple years, and they do robotics outside of First Global. So that's how they got selected as this year's first global Team Zimbabwe. And then of course, FTC team 8565 was selected as the first global team for USA. So they select like basically some of the top robotics teams from around every country to participate in this challenge. And you work together over a period of a few months to complete 3 different challenges that were given to you. So this is just a picture of Team Zimbabwe in First Global Challenge. Yeah, of course it's sponsored by First, same company that sponsors FTC, FOO, all the other things, and founded by Dean Kamen. So this is just another one of his initiatives to like spread STEM all across the world. And this time it's like truly global, whereas FTC, FOO, they're also all over the world. But I think the focus in FTC and FOO is more focused in the US. First Global is truly like international. Every single country is trying to work together. And their mission is obviously to spread STEM education and help encourage the next generation to solve problems. So you can see every single country. This was from back when we had in-person First Global, but these past few years, unfortunately, we've had to work remotely, and it's been an experience adapting. So history, it was founded, the first few years were in person. As you can see, there's an in-person competition between 2 teams from different countries, but these past few years, it's been, of course, virtual online, but we still had this cooperation between every country. The very first Global Challenge was in 2017, and every year has a big general theme that's somehow trying to encourage people to help the world in some way. So in 2017, the challenge was to help build a sustainable power grid. In 2018, the challenge was again to build a sustainable power grid, building on the previous challenge. And then 2019, the theme was preserving the world's oceans. And I think this is an image of the game. So First Global Challenge, usually they have a section of the robot game. And it's just like one of the FTC robot games where you have a specific set of rules. And usually the rules are like tied into the thematic of preserving the oceans. So I think in the 2019, this was their robot game. They had to move these balls around to simulate cleaning pollution off of the ocean. In 2020, the theme was connecting communities. This was the very first virtual one. very first virtual global challenge. And then 2021, this year, the theme was Discover and Recover. And this is what we're going to be presenting today, the efforts of Team USA and Team Zimbabwe in this Discover and Recover first global challenge. So as I mentioned, the 2021 challenge has 3 parts. The first one is a solution challenge, where you're expected to pick from one of these 4 general categories: education, environment, health, and economy. And across 3 phases, you're supposed to focus on one of these 4 areas and build a solution to a problem in your local area. So both us and Team Zimbabwe chose to help the environment, and we'll talk about more our solutions there and how we ended up working together later on. And yep, that's a brief intro, and we'll go into more detail for all of the.
Byron. So
Yeah.
Trish joined back. Trish, do you want to give a few words? Byron just walk through Marvin's slides.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Trish? I think. Yeah. Do you want to talk about these pictures? So where were these pictures from? Is this from during the first global challenge, or is this before?
Not sure if she can hear us. She's still muted.
Yeah. And I guess, does anyone have any questions over the structure of First Global? We'll go over all like the different tracks, all the different phases later, because there's 3 different challenges: there's solution, CubeSat, and robot. And then the solution challenge in specific has 3 phases. So we'll go over all those in detail later and the work we've done on each of them. But does anyone have any questions over, like, I guess, what is First Global?
Okay, we can move on.
Okay, then in that case, we can move on. And if Trish gets back, then we can talk about the slides a bit more again.
Okay, thank you. So next we're gonna have Bryant and Abby from Root -1. Bryant and Abby are 2 of the founding members of World Inspire Award-winning Team 9879 Root -1, and we're both on the 2019 First Global Challenge team representing USA.
Hello. Can you
Hi,
see
everyone.
my slides? Are the slides working, Abby?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Awesome. So good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to present today. My name is Abby Herrera. I'm a sophomore at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, and I'm studying public policy.
And I'm Bryant Cassidy. I'm a sophomore at Rice University, majoring in computer science. And yeah.
And like it was already said, we are 2 of the founding members of FTC Team 9879 Root -1 from Springdale, Arkansas. And we're here today to talk about our experience as Team USA at the 2019 First Global Challenge in Dubai. So our journey to Dubai began at the 2019 FTC World Championship. And I don't know if you can hear the video, but
Is the sound? Wait, I can fix that.
Yeah.
Let me fix it. Now can you hear it?
Yes, now it can be heard.
It's more important on the radio.
So as this video depicted, We did win the Inspire Award at the 2019 World Championship in Houston, and it was our 4th year as an FTC team when we won that award. And the selection of Team USA alternates between the Inspire Award winners at the Detroit Championship and the Houston Championship. So we were lucky enough that in 2019, the bid to Dubai went to the Inspire Award winners at the Houston Championship.
So even though we were an experienced FTC team, we quickly needed to learn about FGC while simultaneously fulfilling our regular season FTC commitments. So we met with FTC team 9794, Wizards.exe, who represented Team USA in 2018. We met with them virtually. And then we also received our kit of parts, which unlike FTC and FGC teams are restricted to a certain kit of parts, and this keeps all teams on a level playing field. The real work began when the game was officially released, which you can see here. So as talked about in the last presentation, our game was Ocean Opportunities, where where the game was based around cleaning up this debris from the ocean. There are a few different ways to score, mostly of placing the large or small balls into one of the few places on the processing barge, which were worth 2, 3, and then 6 points. One of the main strategies at the competition was actually to collect as many balls as possible, since there was no limit, and then dump them all at the end of the game. You could also at in-game park on the processing barge for 5 or 10 points, and then a hang was worth 20 points.
So our bid to Dubai was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And because of that, our team received a lot of local, regional, state, and even national attention for being named Team USA. Additionally, the increased visibility that came with attending First Global Challenge was very meaningful for our team because we were able to promote FIRST and STEM education in our communities, and we had a big platform to do that. And before traveling to Dubai, we were invited to Washington, D.C. by the Arkansas legislature in D.C. And we learned that one of our senators actually wrote about our Inspire Award win and our first global bid and submitted it to the National Congressional Record. So we had the pleasure of meeting the previous Team USA, which was FTC Team 9794, Wizards.exe. And being selected as Team USA was also very financially beneficial for our team. Northwest Arkansas isn't really known as a large tech hub, it's more agriculture, but our accolades really put Northwest Arkansas on the international stage for STEM education. So as a result, we received numerous generous donations from multiple companies based in Northwest Arkansas, and they continue to support our team today.
We also participated in the Global STEM Corps, where we served as mentors to Team Syria and Team Eritrea. Although we were competing against these teams, it was a great learning opportunity for both of us, and it was great to finally meet them in person at the competition after we had been mentoring them for the weeks prior. You can see some pictures of us with them at the competition. We had an extremely long trip to Dubai as our flight from Dallas was initially canceled because of a mechanical failure on the plane. So we later got bused to Houston, and we finally departed from Houston approximately 10 hours after our scheduled departure from Dallas. And as everyone knows, the flight from Houston to Dubai is very long. But when we finally made it to Dubai, we were greeted by a camera crew, and even though we were extremely tired, we were immediately immersed in the Emirati culture. You can see some of the pictures from that now.
So the first day of our competition consisted of team check-in, loaded, and setup. We got to see the very elaborate competition venue, and we also got to meet our UAE correspondent, Saif, who you can see in the green vest in the middle of the screen, who helped us navigate the competition and venue logistics. And he was generally just like a great guy to introduce us to culture in the UAE. And that evening, teams attended an extravagant opening ceremony, which included a presentation of all teams, an aquatic Cirque du Soleil show, and a concert from renowned First supporter Will.i.am. as you can see a little clip of there. So as you can probably tell, First Global was different than any other first competition our team has ever gone to. So we did have judging. It was very Q&A style, so there was no set presentation, but the judging had a lot more focus on the team's journey to becoming the representative for their country, as well as their journey fundraising and really getting to Dubai. We talked very little about the actual robot and any community service that we did during that season as well, but it was still a lot of fun.
As with any competition or any robotics competition, there were robot matches. Here's a bit of one of our better matches. You can see our robot in the top left. The video kind of freezes a little bit, but that's okay. So you'll see when the game starts, the balls are kind of all released onto the field. Our robot, what we were best at was picking up the small orange balls and shooting them into the high goal. Throughout the competition, this actually turned out to not be the best strategy because the teams that were collecting all of the balls and then dumping them at the end of the game were getting a lot more points and were a lot better at keeping balls off of the other team's side of the field. So we'll let this play for a little bit and then we can. And you'll also notice that the small balls were much higher of a priority for almost all teams rather than the big ones. So after matches had concluded, there was a closing ceremony where teams were presented with awards.
This award is the Katherine Johnson Award for Engineering Documentation. This is awarded to teams that are able to effectively demonstrate how they built their robot through an engineering notebook, which covers the journey they took with their robot from initial planning, designs, and prototypes through to the final design. Our silver medal for the Katherine Johnson Award for Engineering Documentation goes to Team USA. And the gold.
So as you heard, we won the silver medal for the Katherine Johnson Award for Engineering Documentation. At the competition, we also had the honor of meeting leaders from both the United States and the UAE. You can see some pictures here with some of the people that we met. We also got a fair amount of media attention, especially from the USA UAE embassy, and they actually created the following video after the competition.
Let me start by sending a message to all these young people here. First, I'd say anytime they hear someone telling them this is impossible or this can't be done or you can't do this, don't listen. Look to the future and don't let anything stand in your way.
I think there are a lot of problems in the world today that can be solved, by engineers.
I think the best thing that FIRST did to us is it brought people from all different cultures to interact with us.
So this afternoon in our final match of the day, we're partnered with the UAE and Lithuania.
There are 193 teams here today in Dubai. These kids have to learn how to cooperate and solve problems together. Inventing is about imagination, courage, the ability to fail and plow through it.
Even though we have different accents and we're from different regions of the world, our passion for STEM is what brought us together.
So I want to thank everyone for listening to our short presentation about our experience. Of course, I want to congratulate the TechnicBots for being chosen as Team USA this year. I'm sure you'll do great at representing the USA. And we hope you have an amazing, great learning experience despite it being virtual. But now we welcome any questions that anyone may have.
If there are no questions, thank you, and that's all we have.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Bryant and Abby. Next, we're going to have Grace from TechnicBots. So for the first Global Challenge 2021, 8565 TechnicBots was nominated by the FTC headquarters as Team USA to compete in the challenges. And we're honored to work on the challenges in the last 12 weeks, having Michael and Mila from Boys and Girls Club join us in the journey. In the next few presentations, we're going to share the work from our various challenges in more detail.
Yes, thank you. So let me just share my screen real quick. Yeah, sorry, the slideshow is taking a little bit long to load. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Grace and I am a sophomore at Jasper High School. I'm just gonna go over some of the virtual challenges that we had for First Global this year. And these are our presenters. So the theme of this year for First Global Challenge is Discover and Recover. In the past year, we have all been touched by difficult challenges in various aspects of our lives as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, this period of time has also shown that STEM can provide critical answers to COVID-19 and other major events. The 2021 First Global Challenge focused on advancing new ways STEM can prioritize practical solutions and counter the effects of the problems communities continue to face across the world. The virtual challenge ran for 12 weeks and consisted of 3 main components. The first component of this is the Solutions Challenge. The whole Solutions Challenge consisted of 3 phases where teams tackled problems in their communities by creating projects to solve them using STEM within the span of the season. During phase 1, each team identified a relevant problem in their community that falls into one of 4 categories: education, environment, health, and economy, and developed a solution to help solve it using STEM. During phase 2, teams were challenged to form their own alliance and work together for the duration of the challenge with another First Global team. During phase 3, each alliance came up with one unified solution that could work on a global scale. For phase 3 of the Solutions Challenge, we formed an alliance with Team Zimbabwe. But before we delve more into that, here are a few fun facts and similarities about both teams. We are fascinated by robotics and hope to make a difference in our communities and in the world at large. Okra is a traditional food in Zimbabwe, and in our icebreaker session where we got to know each other better, we shared that okra is also traditional Mexican food and is enjoyed in Texas where we're located, which is a pretty cool similarity. Both teams enjoy Christmas, although we celebrated at opposite ends of the year due to Zimbabwe being in the southern hemisphere, making it summer in December and winter in June. After talking to each other and learning more about both teams and countries, we were really pumped to work together and couldn't wait to get started. Team USA and Team Zimbabwe combined both our solution projects in the environment category from phase 1 to develop a joint solution with a more significant impact on the world, making us the dream team. Team USA is a first tech challenge team from Dallas, Texas, in the United States of America, while Team Zimbabwe is a first global challenge team with members selected from all around their country. With technology, communication is no longer a barrier between the two continents, although school schedules and new COVID variants did pose unexpected challenges to both teams. Zimbabwe was under curfew as a result of COVID, and they had to leave their training center before the curfew starts. And Team USA had to group before 7 a.m. local time on the weekends to squeeze in more direct collaboration with Team Zimbabwe over Zoom. However, all these challenges did not stop the two teams that were both eager to work together. Here's an overview of our Phase 3 Solutions Challenge. As showing this displayed slide, we have combined both Team USA's plastic pirate robot and Team Zimbabwe's land boogie to tackle one of our environment's biggest issues, plastic waste. Here's a little video that covers a little bit of the Solutions Challenge. We formed an alliance with Team Zimbabwe and picked the issue of plastic pollution, as it is a challenge faced by people from both continents.
We designed the plastic pirate and land boogie as solutions to this problem and designed the framework to make this into a global mission.
For our solutions challenge, building the robot required meticulous planning on our part. For example, we did physics calculations to find the buoyant force that our chassis could provide, and also made extensive use of CAD tools in designing the entire robot.
We used a multi-stage machine learning model to classify and locate all the plastic waste floating on the surface of the water.
Throughout the Solutions Challenge, our team learned that creating an open source solution requires lots of details, so it is easy for others to replicate.
Okay. We formed an alliance with Team Zimbabwe. Okay, now let's move on to the next section of First Global, the Robotics Challenge. The Robotics Challenge is an opportunity for students to reinforce their robot design, building, and programming skills. First Global teams used the components provided in a Rev Robotics kit of parts and created solutions to 4 individual build tasks. Instead of assembling a single robot, teams completed those 4 build tasks, which represented major components often found on First Global robots. And these here are the 4 different build tasks that we had to do. Here is another short video that kind of shows our journey through the Robotics Challenge.
In the Robotics Challenge, we learned to be resourceful and get creative since we were building with a very limited kit of parts, which was a completely new experience for us.
Wait, sorry, accents.
In the Robotics Challenge, we learned to be resourceful and get creative since we were building with a very limited kit of parts, which was a completely new experience for us.
So more details of the robotics challenge will be presented later on in this track. Now for the third and final section of the first global challenge, the CubeSat prototype challenge. So for this challenge, teams defined a mission of importance to their communities and then used a provided Arduino-based kit to create their own CubeSat prototypes to provide a tangible solution to that local need. Teams designed, built, programmed, and tested their CubeSat prototypes and then deployed them into the lower layers of Earth's atmosphere. So in case you do not know what a CubeSat prototype is, they are a class of nanosatellites with a standardized size of 10 cubic centimeters. They are launched into space using rocket-powered launch vehicles or can be deployed from the International Space Station. CubeSat prototypes are modeled after space-ready CubeSats. However, instead of operating in space, they are launched into the lower layers of Earth's atmosphere using methods such as high-altitude balloons. Here's a video going over that.
We seek to address a pressing issue to our local community, namely air pollution resulting from the over-reliance on motor vehicles as a form of transport. We seek to quantify the diffusion of particulate matter generated by internal combustion engines to the upper layers of our troposphere, which affects rainfall and global warming and local weather conditions.
Yeah, and more details on the CubeSat challenge will also be presented later on this track. And now we are opening the floor to any questions that any of you may have. And if there are no questions, then I think it's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Solution challenge.
Okay, let me just go ahead and start screen sharing. Okay, so welcome to our design of this, our response to the solutions challenge from Team USA. And the presenters today are going to be me, Champers. I'm in 12th grade at Lebanon Trail High School. Some of my hobbies include swim and messing around with electronics. And Anthony will be presenting later. He goes to St. Mark's. He's currently in 11th grade, and there's some of his hobbies. So we're going to be going over the problem that we chose to tackle in the solutions challenge, which is marine plastic pollution, and our response to it, our solution, which is the plastic pirate robot that we built or tried to build. So the problem is that, well, we have a ton of plastic being produced every year, over 270 million tons of plastic. And most of these plastics really can't be recycled, or even if they are recycled, a lot of it still ends up causing environmental problems. Plastics come from synthetics and they decompose very, very slowly. And depending on the type, this could be anywhere between 20 to 500 years for a single piece of plastic to decompose. Now what ends up happening is a bunch of that plastic is getting thrown into our ocean, which really isn't too great for marine life. So our solution is to build a robot to help collect some of that plastic. We call it the plastic pirate. And what it essentially does is go around and collect pollution or debris off of the surface of the water. So anything that's floating on the surface of the water will be able to collect. And it will be storing that locally in a storage bin and filtering out all the water so it doesn't accumulate too much weight. And then once the storage bin is filled, it would go back to land and then we can empty it out. So here's a CAD rendering of the robot. You can see over here that here's our intake system. We essentially had a conveyor belt along with a vinyl tube design. And we plan to power the thing through 2 sealed lead acid batteries and a solar panel. More details on that later. So as for the actual build of this robot, as with all robots, we started out with designing the chassis. And we decided to go fully custom without no kit of parts this time, because the robot had to be quite big in order to collect a reasonable amount of debris off the water. So we built the chassis out of PVC tubes and put 2 end caps on both sides to help trap the air inside. Now, what this accomplishes is this is what provides most of the buoyant force on our robot, because it's 2 massive tubes with essentially no weight, or well, very little weight. So that's used to provide buoyant force to the robot. And to mount our other hardware on the robot, we used aluminum extrusions or aluminum brackets and some wood here and there. To attach these aluminum extrusions onto the PVC pipes, we had a little C-shaped cover on it, and then we would drill screws into the cover. And the cover was glued onto the pipe so that we wouldn't actually damage the pipe and punch a hole in it. If we punched a hole in it, it wouldn't be watertight anymore and we wouldn't have any flotation, which means our robot would sink. To propel the robot, we chose to use 2 brushless DC motors with propellers on them. You'll see that in the CAD model later, or yeah, right here. You can see these are the motors that are actually driving the entire chassis, and it actually worked pretty great. We don't have a rudder on this thing. We're relying on the 2 motors, controlling the speed of the 2 motors to steer. And here you can just see the entire thing, or just the chassis working. This is when we tested in a backyard pool to make sure everything was working before we started putting more things on it. And now we move on to designing the intake. So we had several different ideas for designing the intake. Well, actually, for the debris found on the water, there's 2 main categories that we thought of: round objects and non-round objects. So for round objects, or for non-round objects, we could easily just slide them up a conveyor belt like this. So this entire sheet of fabric would start turning like this, and then that would just draw whatever debris was on the water into the storage bin. So that's how that works. But then if we were to encounter a plastic bottle or something of that sort, they would simply roll off of the conveyor belt. So we added these 4 stages of vinyl tubes up here at the top to stop that from happening. So these will be able to push the round objects straight up the ramp. And that's how we designed our intake. So here's a model of the robot in 3D. This is like the nice already rendered view in Blender. But if we rotate around a little bit, you'll see that these were right here. These are these little covers on the PVC pipes I was talking about earlier, so we don't damage the actual pipe like this pipe while we're drilling, or we're trying to drill holes to mount things. And then if you want to look at the propellers we use, they're actually quite small propellers relative to the size of the robot. The size of the robot was about 1 meter by 1 meter. So it's quite a large robot. And we just have these tiny propellers on it, which actually works pretty great because the brushless motors spin really fast. We chose to use brushless motors instead of brushed DC motors because brushed motors will not survive in water. They have brushes on them and that have to be exposed inside the motor. So that would mean that if water were to get inside of the motor, the entire thing would just stop working. Whereas with brushless motors, there are no exposed contacts. It's just a simple ring of magnets that are rotating around a center coil. So that's why we chose to use brushless motors instead of brushed, even though that made the electronics quite a bit harder. And the solar panel is up here for good measure. While it's up there to help extend the life of the robot. We can just run the robot off of these two batteries right here, but the issue is that they aren't going to last very long. So the solar panel helps extend the life of the batteries or the runtime of this overall robot. And as for the electronics box, we just shoved it right here under the ramp because that was the most convenient place for it. It's not in the way. We can't really mount anything else there. So that's where we put our electronics box. And finally, let's talk about how we designed the circuitry on it. So our control circuit was mostly centered around a Raspberry Pi. And we controlled the electronic speed controllers, the ESCs, which were needed to power the brushless motors through the Raspberry Pi's GPIO pins. We had a GPS going to it to help the actual robot know where it was in the water. And we also have a camera on it to help assist in object detection or object recognition. The Raspberry Pi is running some sort of object recognition on it, which is why we couldn't just go with a regular microcontroller. That wouldn't be powerful enough. And then the solar panels over here are hooked through a maximum power point tracking charge controller to help maximize the amount of power we're getting from it. And we're also storing some of the data to an SD card. The SD card also hosts the operating system we're running. And now Anthony will talk to you about the software he wrote for the robot.
All right, let me share my screen. I don't think I shared the right thing. Okay, do you see it? Do you see it now? All right, so I'll start with the software here. The topics we're going to go over is the process of training an AI machine learning algorithm, and then the machine learning the architecture, AI with the edge TPU, which is this thing that accelerates machine learning models, and then our results, and then how we use the results in our project. So let's start off with training AI. So the process of training a machine learning algorithm actually turns out that like when you compare the time between training your model and like labeling the data labeling tends to take up the most time. And there wasn't really any good public data set, so we had to label our own data. And we spent like tens of hours working on that stuff. But basically in our processing pipeline for training an AI, we start off with video collection. So in our case, we recorded a few videos, like we went to a pool, we threw some like water bottles or face masks in just as our training data. We recorded like 22 videos, and then we extracted around 2,000 images from that. And we really don't have the time or manpower or money, if we want to outsource our work, to manually label all of these, like that 2,000 images. So So we like select like 100 or 200 images from those and just label them by hand. So yeah, in total, and also for the image extraction, once you extract all the images, you have to resize them to 300 by 300, which is the size that the model takes in. So like I recorded the videos just with my iPhone and then downsized them to 300 by 300. And so after we label, there's this method called data augmentation. So what this does is like you mirror your training data as well as the label. So that's just generating new data, because when you basically can like duplicate your data with that once you mirror, and you can also do small crops or shears, which is just like tilting it kind of, and then flipping and then adding noise. So with this process, we can triple the amount of training data we have, which is really good for our purpose. And then another way that we help improve our model is with transfer learning. So if we wanted to train our model completely from scratch, we would need a lot more data and a lot more time. But with transfer learning, this pre-trained model is trained with millions of other images. So the model already knows like, hey, I know what this kind of looks like. And then it can kind of apply what it already knows to our data set, our custom data set. And lastly, we have model conversion. So after we trained the model on all the augmented data and whatever, the model that comes out is just like a TensorFlow frozen graph model, and we have to convert it to TensorFlow Lite, and because that's what the Raspberry Pi runs on, because the Raspberry Pi is a relatively lightweight device, so we have to run TensorFlow Lite on that. And so for our purposes, when we tried running the model on Raspberry Pi, we found it to be pretty slow. So we went out and bought this thing called the Edge CPU, which made it better, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. Okay, and then here is our architecture. So there's been a lot of evolution in the architecture of machine learning models. For example, the FTC SDK, they use a mobile net model, but this efficient net model is better and faster, and it's newer. So with the Raspberry Pi, this efficient net model, it can process frames within 200 milliseconds. So that's like 5 frames per second. But with a TPU, this model gets 5 times faster. So it only takes 40 seconds to process a frame. And so why exactly do we use this efficient net machine learning model architecture? So we just tested a little bit and we realized that this model has the capacity to get more accurate results once trained compared to the other models. And so I'll do a quick, although this diagram might look pretty complicated, I'll just do a quick explanation of how this model works. So on the very left side, you may see there's this backbone. So what exactly does this do? So within an image, you have RGB channels, and this image is 300 by 300. And as it goes down, it does this process called convolution, which basically you're just applying different filters, and then you apply filters on top of those filters. And then at the very end, at the last few layers, you have these specially trained filters that create a feature map. And then this feature map, it goes into this middle where you have this iterated by FPN layer, which is a bidirectional feature pyramid network layer. So what this does, it just is designed that when you combine all the feature maps together, you can get a more reliable output. So basically researchers just spend a lot of time designing these architectures, and as time goes on, every model is slightly better than the previous one. And so this is pretty good for us. All right, and now we get to the Edge TPU. So this Edge TPU is actually pretty incredible. So on the left side, you can see that's the size of the Edge TPU accelerator thing, and then the plugs in by USB-C and into the Raspberry Pi. And that's what gives us like our 5 times speed up, or 5 to 10 times speed up. And within the Edge TPU itself, the actual I was going off on a quick tangent. When I got the Edge TPU, the first one was defective and they didn't want us to return it. So I just took it apart and I found out that the Edge TPU chip itself is it's like smaller than my thumbnail. So it contains a tremendous amount of processing power. It can do 4 trillion operations per second with only 2 watts. And it's only done on this like extremely small chip within the Edge curl TPU, and it results in a speed up of 10 times. And the sacrifice that we need to do is that there's like a limited instruction set on the Edge TPU, so we can only we can only run certain models. We have to do like special conversions into like a quantized model. So there are limitations, but the trade-off is that it's a lot faster. And on the right side here, we have a diagram. Basically, this is just illustrating that the operations in the Edge TPU are highly parallelized, so that we can do really fast machine learning model inferencing. All right, and here are the results of our model. So the model is not only able to detect where the waste is, but it can also detect what kind of waste there is. So this can avoid collecting organic waste that might be part of the marine life's natural habitat. And so we just detect for masks, water bottles, plastic bags, and straws, all of these things which like marine life could eat up and get hurt. And these plastics also break down to like become poisons for the marine life. And so this robot goes around and collects all the plastic waste visible. How does it do that? Well, we programmed our robot with this algorithm to locate the plastic waste and go to it. So the output of the machine learning model, as you see in this slide, are just bounding boxes. So you can find the exact center of the water bottle. So the robot, it spins around constantly, and then once it's detected some plastic waste, use a P controller to turn precisely to the water bottle, and this P controller is good for our application because it like minimizes overshoot. And so once you like align yourself with the plastic bottle, once it's in the middle of your view, you just go straight forward and with your intake on, and you just keep on going forward until you don't see it anymore. And yeah, so that's all for my part. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Oh.
Okay, if there's no questions, we can have Charles. Oh, there's a question in the chat, Anthony.
Sorry, my audio screwed up for a second. In the chat, what happens if it detects an animal instead of plastic and tries to intake it? Well, like I have faith in our model that it's not going to detect an animal that as a plastic bag or a plastic bottle. And if it does, I'm pretty sure that our robot's like not fast enough to catch up to the animal, because the animal would run away. All right, are there any more questions?
Okay, if not, we can have Charles from Team Zimbabwe just talk for 1 or 2 minutes about their team.
Okay, thank you so much. Our apologies for failing to present due to network challenges. But please, can you confirm, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so Team Zimbabwe, we have been participating in the FGC, First Global Robotics Competition since 2017. We form a team from students coming from different provinces of Zimbabwe. We select students based on interest and their willingness to participate in the competition. So 2017, we had students coming from about 5 schools in one province, that is the capital city. We used to meet and train at University of Zimbabwe. There's a center which houses a supercomputer. So that's where we could meet and train. So we managed to build a robot, and the team managed to travel to Washington, D.C. in 2017. Then in 2018, we managed again to come up with a team. This time, we had the students coming from 2 provinces, Harare province and Mashonaland East. So again, the students managed to design a robot. By then, the theme of the competition 2018 was energy impact. So we managed to travel to Mexico, and we were awarded a bronze medal for a team that can display a can-do attitude. Then in 2019 again, we managed to come up with a team. At this time, we had the students coming from 3 provinces. As our intention is to spread the gospel of robotics in Zimbabwe, encouraging schools to take up robotics as early as primary school. So we again managed to have a team that traveled to Dubai in 2019. And in 2020, we participated again. It was a virtual competition. And the main presenter today, Marvin Chimbwanda, who was supposed to present, was part of the team that participated last year, the virtual competition. And Marvin has since enrolled at University of Zimbabwe. So he's going to do computer engineering. This year he was very active as a mentor as well, assisting students on the CubeSat and the robotics challenge as well. So in brief, we have been participating since the FGC started in 2017. We are learning a lot of concepts from the competition, and we intend to encourage other students from different provinces in Zimbabwe. We have 10 provinces, so only about 3 provinces have participated so far, but our intention is to have many students being exposed to this kind of technology. We also really appreciate the alliance this year that we managed to have with the Team USA. We benefited a lot and we learned a lot. We are still yet to have a meeting that we wish to guide us in terms of programming the robot for collecting plastic bottles in water. We have since received the kit now. The process took a lot of time through immigration officials, but now we have the kit. So we are looking forward to a workshop where they will guide us in terms of how to go about programming the robot, the assembly and the framework. We have it already. We are still looking forward to test the robot functioning. Otherwise, we don't have much to say. We had our presentation well prepared, but due to network problems, Malvin couldn't present. Thank you so much for also allowing us just to say a word or so. I appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you to Team Zimbabwe for being such a great alliance to Team USA. So now we're going to move on to the drawing. So okay. Okay, it looks like I can't share screen. So Ellen, can you share the wheel
Yeah, sure.
with the names?
Let me put the names in first.
So the first thing that we're going to be drawing is a Go Build dark matter hoodie. And we put all of the participants in the wheel. So now Ellen is going to spin. Okay, so the winner is Aditya. So Aditya, please private chat me your email so that I can contact you on how to get the prize to you. So make sure to keep asking questions because we'll have another giveaway at the end of the session for a $25 Amazon gift card. So our next speaker is from Nicaragua, and we're going to have Ariane. So next up, we have First Global Challenge Team Nicaragua, an innovative team that aims to incorporate STEM education in their community, presenting on their experiences in this year's challenge.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to present right now. It's okay. I need to put my camera on because it's going to be really slow, the internet, so it's okay, I think.
Yes, that's fine. We can see your presentation.
Okay, so good afternoon. I'm the speaker of the Nicaragua, and I'm going to talk to you about our experience in the First Global Challenge. And first of all, wait, I think it's okay. First of all, why did we participate in the First Global Challenge? Well, first, it was because we wanted to be an innovative team. We wanted to empower other people in our country, and also we wanted to teach other adolescents and teenagers that there exists this type of competition in the world. And yes, the problems we ran into were the time we participated. Well, we registered super late. I think it was like on August, I think. So we had so little time and the money, of course, and the lack of help. Well, first of all, the time, it was not only because of the registering part, but also because the CubeSat prototype and the robotics kit arrived so late, like a week before the deadline. so it was last week. And the money, of because the kids were coming all the way from Hong Kong, we had to pay a lot of money to have them ship them to us. And the lack of help that we saw is that, well, first of all, was our first time to be in this type of competition, and it was only 3 people, so we didn't have like a lot of knowledge on how to build a robot, on how to build a CubeSat prototype, and this took us a lot of time to do and a lot of effort. So these were the problems that we ran to, and of course, uh, we hope that people that participate in the other year do not have these type of problems. And our solution consists of making education accessible for people who have autism in Nicaragua. I'm going to explain it here. So first of all, it's like Aria, that's our robot, and of course the autism sign. And why did we like created the solution is because first of all we said that the lack of education that people with autism have in Nicaragua, first of all, because the there doesn't exist any type of special ed schools for people who have this condition, and also teachers are not well prepared to attend this type of persons, and education it's not valid enough. And the only path that exists for people who have Down syndrome or who have any condition that affects their learning is only in elementary school. So once they graduate from elementary school, that's here it is like sixth grade, they do not have any other type of education, and they don't work, and it only makes worse our economy. And the second thing is that our technology is not well used. First of all, because in Nicaragua, schools are not well equipped with like laptops and tablets and cell phones. So our solution tries to take advantage of educational robotics to create soft skills for people who have autism. And then we try to merge this idea in our second phase of the solution challenge that we have with Puerto Rico team. And the thing that we created was an app. I don't have the pictures of the app right now, but we created an app that solves this main challenge, but instead of using the robotics, part, we wanted just to create an app like Discord that will obviously help kids who have this type of condition develop their soft skills and develop their communication skills. And well, we try to build like a community online for people who have this condition, and also for educators, parents, and teachers. So any type of questions or anything like that? I don't know.
I can start off by asking a question. What was your team's favorite part of the challenge?
Okay, so our favorite part was, of course, the solution challenge, because we had like a lot of ideas to merge on, and we didn't have the problem like of the time, because obviously the solution was just to create a solution and a prototype. So we didn't have like any problem with that. But a problem we did have in that part is that we were only 3 people in the group. So that was the most difficult part, but we enjoyed the most the solution challenge because it was really awesome, and it was like an incredible experience to be a creative person.
Okay, great. There's another question for you in the chat. I can read it out if you want. How did you cooperate with your alliance? What was their original idea, and how did you combine your two ideas?
Okay, so first, we actually didn't have an alliance. We submitted the form actually. So we teamed up with Team Puerto Rico, and they were only 2 girls, and we were also only team girls. So it was all female teams. That's how I could say. So their idea was to create an app that help teenagers once they enter university to acquire what it is called here economy skills, or to help them in their business ideas and all that stuff. So what we did was to merge the idea of making an app, but we still had the same problem that was kids with autism in Nicaragua and their lack of education equality.
Okay, thank you so much, Ariane. So next we're gonna have 5 presenters from Team USA. So we have Austin, John, Derek, Champers, Rithik. These are 5 presenters. They're all members of FTC Team TechnicBot, as well as First Global Challenge Team USA. And they're going to present on this year's First Global Challenge Robotics Challenge. So, okay.
Okay, so here's the robotics challenge for the first global challenge this year. Like Melody said, there are 5 of us presenting today. My name is Austin. I'm attended Texas Academy of Math and Science. I'm in grade 11, and some of my hobbies are tennis, video gaming, hanging out with my friends. The other 4 presenters are Derek, John, Champers, and Hrithik. We're also all in high school, and their hobbies are listed below. So here's the first part of the challenge, the robotics challenge. So this robotics challenge is very different from FTC challenges because in this challenge, we have a limited amount of materials that we can use. And it's all listed in the bill of materials, which is given out in the document. And this is very different from the FTC challenge because in the normal FTC challenge, we can use whatever components we want. We can 3D print and CNC anything. So this is kind of an adaptation we had to make. And in addition, this year's challenge is also virtual. So teams like us have to record and document our submissions, and they have to be clear so it's unambiguous. And that means that our robots do not have to be competition ready. They just have to work at least once for the camera. So here's the drivetrain delivery. And in the drivetrain delivery challenge, the robots will start on the left side at the starting point and will follow the arrows. And as it passes through checkpoints like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it will earn points. And then when it returns back to the starting point, it will earn even more points. So here's our design process. So we begin by looking through the bill of materials to check which parts that we could use for a robot. And this helped us set the parameters that we could build in. And like I mentioned before, the bill of materials is limited, unlike the typical FTC challenges, where we have the freedom to build whatever we want. So after studying the bill of materials, we selected the wheels we wanted and the motors to build our chassis. And then we designed this entire drivetrain in CAD to confirm all the parts we needed would work perfectly. And then finally, we built the chassis. So here's the drivetrain course. And this is the minimum requirement size, and it's already fairly big, as you can see. It's like 200 centimeters in longitude for each oval, and then 160 centimeters in latitude. So it's quite big for a living room. And then here's the final drivetrain decision. So we went with a box shape, frame, we have 2 traction wheels and 2 omni wheels that are driven by 2 ultraplanetary motors that are in the center of the chassis, and everything on the robot is chain driven. And so the sprockets on each of the wheel shafts are 20 to 15. And on the motors, there's a 3-to-1 and 5-to-1 gear cartridge on each of them, making it a 15-to-1 gear ratio. So in the end, the effective gear ratio is 20-to-1 for each wheel. And the dimensions are 470 millimeters by 420 millimeters by 130 millimeters. And here's the CAD model that I made in Fusion. So here, as you can see, we have 4 wheels, 2 traction wheels and 2 omni wheels. Like I mentioned before, here we have the 2 ultraplanetary motors in the middle and the sprockets. And there's no chain on this design, there's no chain in CAD, but usually on the actual robot, there's going to be a chain connecting all 3 sprockets together. And here's the final result that Prithik did using Teleop. And this is the final robot on the left here with our Team USA graphics on. So this is the starting point, and it's traveling along the arrows in the diagram. This is location 2. And then afterwards, it travels through location 4, earning more points. And it continues along the arrows. And then finally, it returns back to the starting point over here, thus completing the challenge. And that's it for drivetrain delivery.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, now moving on to the intake challenge. For the intake intrigue, for the device or the intake, the main goal of this challenge is to lift a bottle. So the example is the purified or the plastic water bottle on the right. And the device must be able to lift the bottle off the ground at a minimum of 5 centimeters with a stable grip so that it doesn't move them a lot. And the device must also be able to release the bottle from a height above 5 centimeters. And it must show that the bottle is no longer being held or controlled by the intake. So for the intake design process, we start out with a 2-part mechanism. So we would have a claw and then an arm. We also decided to use a motor versus a servo for each of the 2 parts. So a motor for the arm, and then for the claw itself, we chose to go with the servo. And we then CAD'd it to see what the parts that we would need. And then we just tested and then made some changes based on the testing to improve it further. So examples could be like for the claw itself, we changed from a 90-degree bracket to 120-degree bracket on one of the sides to allow more consistent grabbing of the water bottle itself. Yeah, so this goes into more detail of the final design decision. So we decided to go for the claw. It was powered by a Res Smart Servo to control the open and closing functions itself. And the servo gear was attached to a smart servo. That way it could transfer power between the claws or together via gears. And the claw itself was mounted on a slanted extrusion. For the arm, to raise the claw, it was powered by a Rev Core Hex motor. It was attached to the slanted extrusion, and it was mounted onto a separate vertical extrusion, which was then mounted on the chassis. So this entire intake design was mounted onto a chassis. So here is the CAD. So this is the CAD model of the intake. So it's pretty CADed, so we can see all the parts that we would need and how everything would space out. Okay. And for the final results, so here you can see the arm going down to grab the water bottle, and then once it has a firm grip, so you measure it first to see. Right now, I'm measuring to see that it clears 5 centimeters. And then we're testing to see if the intake has a firm grip. All of this was coded by Hrithik.
Okay. I guess I should share for this one. Okay. Okay, so I guess I could start already. So the launcher launch shot thing is basically a robot must launch tennis ball sized object. Then the object independently flies through the air and land into this goal. Wait. Okay. And this diagram is like kind of roughly to scale, and the robot has to fit inside this gray box, which is about like 1/2 meter on all sides. And it like, yeah, over here. And we had about like 2 weeks to make this. So what we did was a catapult. So we started with a bunch of research on like online. We looked at some guy on how to do like catapults, and our mechanism, which is based on this, is called the choo-choo mechanism. Basically, a screw poking out of this gear hits this first linkage, causing the 2 linkages to bend back on each other, like that. And then as soon as it passes over the center, then the springs can like freely pull this up, and the things like unfold in the opposite direction. And that causes it to like go up super fast. And then at the end of the catapult arm, it's just like a normal cradle for any ball, just like this one. Okay, so our final design looks like this thing on the right. And here's the drawing in CAD that like we based all the dimensions off of. You can see there's this like line for the catapult when it's fully pulled back, and this line for the catapult when it's like fully extended. And we wanted to maximize the distance between them so we can like maximize how long it accelerates. So we like minimize the amount of ground clearance, and like the second linkage has to be longer than the first linkage. So we like make it only 1 millimeter longer here. I guess for linkages, we can't just use like a custom bar. So we actually did a bunch of like kind of iterations and a lot of work on these linkages. There's like a bearing block here connected to an extrusion for the first linkage, and the second linkage is just like these 2 V bearings connected by string. So this is the final CAD model. I guess you can see here the cradle we ended up going with, just a giant like sprocket with a bunch of like screws sticking out. And those are like the cradling things. And then the spring itself is a bunch of surgical tubing that goes in between these 2 hinges. And they're attached by like zip ties, which we like a lot because then we can just like tighten the zip tie and it gets more spring force. Or if you want it less, then you just cut the zip tie and make a new one. Okay, so after we tested physically, what we didn't expect is that the spring force and the catapult was actually like way bigger than what we thought it would be. So you can see in this example, it actually ripped the hex screws out of the extrusion, or this is the channel. So to fix that, we just drilled through the entire thing, and we put a screw through both the, through the entire thing, and that strengthened it a lot. And then here, these joints were also a problem because these plastic hinges aren't super strong. And also there's only one point of contact here. So this extrusion can rotate a bit, and that causes the entire frame to warp whenever the spring is pulled back. So we just put a screw, we drilled in place a hole through both the extrusion and through this channel, and we put a screw on the top and a nut on the bottom. And I guess if we were to do this in FTC, this would not be very good because we will need a washer on beneath the screw, but unfortunately the kit of parts does not have a washer in it, so we can't use them. So right now, this screw is kind of crushing in the extrusion. And then probably one of the biggest structural improvements is this rib right here. So basically, as you can see in the previous slide, whenever you pulled it back, this whole thing would bend a ton. And in order to stop that from happening, we added this rib here. We want it to be a 45-degree bracket, but over here on the bottom mount, there is no rev part that can mount that, right? So what we did instead is we just put this plastic bracket at the bottom, kind of create a corner, and then this 45-degree extrusion will just sit in the corner, and it'll just transfer all the force by pushing on it. And then up here, we were supposed to put a 45-degree side bracket on it, but the extrusion we cut ended up being too short. So what we did instead, we just screwed in this bracket onto the extrusion and slid it down until it clamped this in place. So it works pretty well, although if you were to take this and shake it, this extrusion would fall out and you have to put it back in. I guess I have the video on my, here. Okay. Yeah. I can also show you the CAD model for this. Okay.
Okay, so for the Climber Chaos Challenge, we went through several iterations for this one. Okay, let me first introduce the challenge. So the challenge is basically you have this structure that's 75 centimeters far, this bar that's 75 centimeters high, and you need to design a device to be able to climb that 75 centimeters while carrying at least 7 kilograms of weight. And like all the other challenges, it must fit within a 50 centimeter cube. So simple enough, right? I thought it was simple enough. So the first idea I jumped to was inspired from a past summer study project that I presented in this exact workshop, which is alternative methods of propulsion or linear motion. So one of the designs I tested that summer was using wheels to extend a linear slide by friction. Now, from what I remember of this project, this is great for extending short distances and applying a huge amount of force. Like this right here, just these two hex motors with these compliant wheels maxed out our scale and easily read over 10 pounds. So this is what I initially tried to power our climber device. And well, Here is like the final product. Of course, when we first started designing this, we had to draw it out in CAD just to, design it faster. And then we also verified the physics behind this climber to make sure that the motors could actually provide enough force to lift the device. So here we found that the two motors will be providing 142 newtons of force, which is plenty enough to lift the 7 kilograms, which only requires 68.6 newtons of force. That's more than double what we need, giving what I thought was a good margin of error. But the problem is that when we try to extend, here, I'll just shove this in CAD. Here's the first iteration. So when we try to extend this slide right here, this slide, what would happen is it would extend at a slight angle like that. And then that would start rubbing against this slide right here, the carrier slide, because there were not a lot of points of support for this. So when we tried to move it up and down, there was actually a huge amount of friction between the wheels and this slide. So our first iteration failed like that because of, well, nothing being perfect in the real world. Our second iteration, we moved to linear slides again. We tried to avoid linear slides for our first iteration because linear slides get messy and they're kind of complicated to wire and like spool, and it's a slight headache. So I tried to avoid that as much as possible at first. And this one, we essentially just took two orbital motors and threw on a pulley onto them and then had a 2-stage slide on it. And we also put this one-way switch almost at the top to where, so it could easily clamp onto the PVC pipe that we were using as our support. Now, the problem with this one is, well, this one actually was able to lift itself up pretty nicely. But the main problem with this one is we didn't read the instructions clearly, and our device had to be at least 30 centimeters off the floor. If you do the math, this slide right here is about 48 millimeters, I believe, or no, 48 centimeters. And we're maxing out at 50 centimeters. We're almost maxing out at our 50 centimeter height. And then these could extend another maybe 70 or 40 centimeters. So we were getting around 80 to 90 centimeters of extension. Our bar was placed at 75 centimeters just to make it easy for the one-way switch to clamp onto it. So if you do the math, 80 minus 50, that's exactly, or 75 minus 30, that's 25, meaning that this device could only physically lift itself off the ground 25 centimeters, which wasn't enough to fulfill the requirements. So we had to go back and redo this design again. So in our third iteration, we basically just added another stage of linear slides and changed like the base a little bit to accommodate for the increase in height. And this one's also coming up maxing at 50 centimeters right here. And the linear slides are routed in cascade. And well, we did that mainly because it was easier to route it in cascade than it was in series, I believe. Well, it was easier to route it in cascade, less pulleys, less strings coming loose. And that also means we had to double the radius of the pulley for the extension string, for the return string, my bad. For the return string, the pulley radius had to be doubled. Now that means, well, earlier we also did a physics calculation to verify everything would work, but for this one, the motors could apply 5 times as much force as was needed to lift the 7 kilograms. So that was actually enough this time. The real world isn't completely mean to me. So it was enough to lift the device quite nicely. And that's how we finished out this challenge, by doing a 3-stage cascade linear lift. And here's just a video of it working.
All right, that's good. Okay, that works.
So basically the one-way switch at the top is essentially just two T brackets that kind of form a little bit of a hook shape.
Okay, Anthony, go measure.
Okay, I can show you more on the one-way switch. So here's the final design. I'll put it in material preview so you can see the strings a little bit better. So up here, it's essentially just two of these T brackets mounted together with a spring, or not a spring, it's surgical tube, which has like similar properties to a spring that was included in the rev kit of parts. And this is what was lifting our climber, our final design of the climber. And thanks to Hrithik for programming all of this. He did all the programming for all of these robotics projects.
Okay, I also have a slide, so let me share that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how I programmed the three, I think, drive train delivery, intake intrigue, and what's the last one? The one which Champers was talking about just now. So first, I'm going to talk about how I programmed the drivetrain delivery program. So for that, I had two approaches, which I programmed. I programmed the teleop approach, which basically just used a basic tank drive controlled by two joysticks. And then we had the autonomous approach, which used IMU for turning and encoders for driving forward. So for the teleop approach, it was pretty simple. We used a basic tank drive code for it. And the only difference is that I decided to use two joysticks instead of one joystick for tank drive because I personally found it easier to control. So now for the autonomous code, here is the code for the IMU, which we used for turning. This code snippet is actually part of a method I made for gyro turning. And basically what the method does is it takes in the target angle and then the speed, which we wanted to have. And it checks in a while loop whether the heading method is within a range. And get heading actually returns the current angle, which the robot's facing. So it keeps checking, and when it's not in the range, it will calculate the error, which will be the target angle, which we got from the method, minus the get heading. And then it will set the speed to the speed minus the error so that it can turn in the right direction, the right speed to get to the target angle. And then we had the drive forward method, which used the encoders for the autonomous version. So for this one, we put in a left target, a right target, and these left and right targets was the amount of distance we wanted the left and right motors to go forward. And then we had also a double speed. And basically what this did was it sets the target position of both motors to the left and the right target. And then it says to position, and then it automatically runs to position. And loop here so that it's anything while the left drive and the right drive are running to the position. So it's basically waiting for it to stop. And then finally, when it stops, we turn off the encoders. So should be a video here. Yeah. Let me turn off the volume. It's actually a sped up video, and it's not perfect yet. I was tuning it last night. It still needs a bit more tuning, but this is the best run I've had so far of it. You will see near the end, it kind of goes off the track just a little bit, but yeah. Okay, so, oh, oops. Okay, so now the intake program. For this one, we had a arm and a claw, which we had to control. So I decided for the arm, I would control it yet again by using encoders. And I would control the claw by using the servo.set position method to control the claw. So the code is pretty simple. So whenever gamepad A is pressed, it sets the position to 140, which is actually like pointing downwards. And then whenever gamepad 1.b is pressed, it brings it all the way back up. And then it does the same thing for the claw, just that I think gamepad 1.y opens it, and then gamepad 1.x closes it. So then finally, the Climber Chaos program. So we had a left and a right motor for this. And I decided that we would have like two states to have the motors in. There would be a changing robot position state, which simply just changes the motor's speed based on the direction. So basically the state would let it move up and down. And then the last one is the keep robot's position state. As you saw near the end of the video, which Champers showed, the robot was like simply hanging. So basically this state helps keep the robot in that position without it like falling down because of gravity. So this code is actually, it looks pretty big, but like the basic idea of it is that whenever you press gamepad A, it turns this Boolean called state true. And when state is true, the encoders are turned on and the robot takes its position. So I think it's over here. Yeah, I guess the current position. And then if state here, it sets the target position to that position so that it keeps itself at that position all the time. And then otherwise, in the else, when state is false, it runs without the encoder and it controls the linear slide by the D-pad. So like D-pad down would bring it down, and then D-pad up would bring it up. So yeah. Do you guys have any questions? If not, if you ever like come up with like a question, which like later on, you can email us at technicbots.team@gmail.com. Thank you. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. That's Byron's old tech question. Sorry.
Okay, thank you guys. Also, just a reminder, we really encourage you guys to ask questions in the chat because we have a drawing at the end of this session for a $25 Amazon gift card. And so far, we only have one entry. So make sure to ask questions. So next we have Byron, Otto, and John from Team USA, as well as Team Zimbabwe, and they're going to present on this year's first Global Challenge CubeSat Challenge. So Byron, Otto, and John can go ahead and get started.
All right, Otto's share screen isn't working, then I can share. The CubeSat presentation, right, Melody?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so this is our CubeSat challenge. This is the final part of First Global, the third challenge, and it was a very exciting one. So let's go over who's going to be presenting. So I'm Byron. I'm from Plano West in 11th grade, and I like reading, debate, and playing video games.
Hi, I'm Autobiel. I go to Plano East Senior High. I'm in 11th grade. I enjoy sailing, fishing, and running.
Hello, I'm John, and I'm from Plano Senior High, and I like band, computing, and swimming.
Yeah, and also included here, we'll be talking a little bit about Team Zimbabwe's CubeSat challenge. Unfortunately, they're still having a little bit of trouble with Wi-Fi, so they won't be able to talk themselves. But Team Zimbabwe has also been doing much of the same thing, and we'll talk about their efforts a little here as well as ours. So we're gonna first go over what is CubeSat, then initial planning, then we're gonna talk about our prototyping and design. We're gonna talk about Team Zimbabwe's prototyping a little bit. Then we'll talk about our launch day and our results. Okay. So let's briefly go over what CubeSat even is. So a CubeSat is a miniature cube-shaped satellite. That's what the name stands for. That is used by both hobbyists and actual researchers to usually they're launched into orbit and used much the same way that an actual size satellite is to record data and record data from outer space and from the surface as well, because it's orbiting around. So in First Global Challenge, we're using CubeSat prototypes. So they're basically the same as space-ready CubeSats, but instead of actually being launched into space, which is prohibitively expensive, we are launching them into the lower levels of Earth's atmosphere, aka just the air, using methods such as high altitude balloons and hobbyist rockets. And I think both of us have decided to use balloons this time around. We'll talk about them more in a bit. Let's go over the first global challenge video. I'm sorry. I need to share the sound as well. Okay. So this is the official first global challenge video introducing CubeSats.
What is a CubeSat? CubeSats are a class of nanosatellite with a standardized size of 10 cubic centimeters. They are launched into space using rocket-powered launch vehicles, or can be deployed from the International Space Station. Applications include Earth observation, weather monitoring, communications, and more. A CubeSat can go from concept development to deployment in less than 8 months. By comparison, it takes over 5 years to design and launch a large satellite. CubeSats generally orbit the Earth at an altitude between 400 and 700 kilometers and travel at a speed of around 8 kilometers per second. That means they orbit the Earth every 90 minutes. An affordable and accessible way to study the benefits of this technology is through CubeSat prototypes. A CubeSat prototype is modeled after space-ready CubeSats and features the same size specifications. Instead of space, they are launched into the lower layers of Earth's atmosphere, the troposphere and stratosphere, which extend up to 50 kilometers. CubeSat prototypes do not require the same strict qualifications as space-ready CubeSats for attributes such as vibration, radiation, temperature, and shock. They instead provide a perfect opportunity for you to craft your own space adventure.
Yep. So that was the CubeSat.
What?
That was the introduction to CubeSat. Let's talk over our mission, or what we're trying to use our CubeSat for. So actually, this is a picture of the US, but both Team USA and Team Zimbabwe decided to do their mission on air pollution with the particle sensor. We'll talk more about that later. But basically, both of us decided to use our CubeSat to monitor levels of air pollution in or around our areas. And air pollution is a huge problem basically all around the world, from both the US to Zimbabwe to many other countries. And as you can see here, this is a graph of the PM 2.5 levels, basically how many particles above a certain size are in the air, which is a measure of how poor the air quality is if like there's a lot of big particles. So this is a map of data generated by satellites for the US. And we're planning to generate like a small scale version of this map with the data we collect with our CubeSats. So I guess it's a funny coincidence, but also both of us, both the US and Team Zimbabwe, focus on environment for their solution challenge. So it's a good idea for both of us. We both had the same thought process. Now we want to focus on environmental issues with the CubeSat too. So we wanted to understand our pollution levels, our trend over time, and trends across different regions, across different altitudes especially. And then we wanted to visualize this data, generate graphs like we talked about, and generate actual recommendations to local environmental agencies. Hey, there's a lot more particles over in this region and at this altitude, so that might be a focus to clean up on. So what actually makes up a prototype? Well, every CubeSat prototype that's made out of the kit of parts that FGC provided is based off an Arduino board with an SD card that records data. And each of them contains multiple sensors. One of the most important is obviously the 2.5 PM particle sensor, which actually detects the air quality. And also you need the GPS module to know what position your readings are in. These are basically the most important ones, but we also have a light sensor, air pressure, and UV index sensor, and a camera to like record our flight and supplement all these actual sensors. So let's talk a bit about the prototyping process, and I think Otto and John can talk about what we did here.
Right. So at the beginning of the process, we divided the CubeSat challenge into 4 different tasks, and we assigned each of these tasks to one of the team members. So I worked on programming the Arduino board and sensors to write their values to a CSV file and an SD card. John designed the exterior to fit the sizing requirements and house the board, battery, and sensors. Chambers worked on a motor-powered spool to let out and retract 300 meters of string, and also helped to program the GPS module and made some very helpful changes to the Arduino program, which I made. And Max researched the correct method and size to inflate and launch the balloon. So the parts that we used from the kit were the MKR 1000 board, the laser VOC sensor, the NV shield, and the universal clock. And what each of these do is the MKR board is the microcontroller, the brains of the CubeSat, so to speak. It takes in all the data from all the sensors and writes them or stores them on the SD card, which can then be removed. The laser sensor measures VOC, or volatile organic carbohydrates, I believe, which are particles usually originating from smoke or dust, which diffuse through the atmosphere as a form of pollution. And this sensor takes in the surrounding air and uses lasers to shine through the air and use the properties of the diffusion or scattering of the light to calculate in micrograms per meter the concentration of these pollutants in the air in units of micrograms per meter cubed. It measured 3 different sizes of particles, those with more than 1 micron in diameter, 2.5 micron in diameter, and 10 microns in diameter. And we wrote all that data to our CSV file. The ENV shield collected data on the illuminance, the air pressure, and the temperature. And the universal clock gave us the time in UTC, and which we converted to our local Central Standard Time so that we could record each of the data values to a specific point of time. Next slide. We also used a Beitian BN220 GPS chip. And this gave us our altitude and latitude and longitude and acceleration. Next. To prototype, we started our first iterations on the breadboard. I simply wrote a program to write sensor values from the environmental shield to an SD card. And once I got that simple program working, I could use that format, extend it to write all kinds of different sensors in an CSV file. So there's not only the AV shield, but the smoke sensor, the real-time clock, the GPS, all of them are communicating to the SD, communicating to the MKR board, which is then storing their values on a CSV file in the SD card on the shield. So this way, after it goes up into the atmosphere, collects its data, comes back down, we can open up the CubeSat, take out that CSV, and then process the data which comes out of it. So after we got this program working on the breadboard, then we could solder all these components onto the perf board they provided us. I believe on the next slide shows the connections of all the sensors and the shield which were involved. So you see there's off to the left, that's the main board, all of its connections. Both the laser sensor and the real-time clock off to the right connect to power, to ground, and to pins 21 and 20, which are 12 SCL and 11 SDA. And both of these sensors can communicate through the same pins because they're communicating through the, I believe the SPI, which means that their data can be indexed coming from the same pin. And there's a specific protocol which allows us to collect data at alternating times from two different sensors attached to the same connections. Additionally, we have the laser PM 2.5 sensor, which also connects to power and ground and has data pins going to the serial pins. And we have a light to indicate, we have a LED connected to pin 1 to indicate whether the SD card is accessible. And also there's a power switch and a lithium-ion battery to regulate the power that is going to the whole system. All right, next slide. Thank you. Here's the perf board. Here's what it looks like when it's all soldered together. You can see at the bottom what the connections look like from underneath. And we used a soldering iron. We soldered the components at the bottom to create good, clean solder joints. And we trimmed off the excess. And we have a single integrated system on this board and external connections to run to the GPS and the VOC sensor. Here's a sample of our code. We programmed it in the Arduino IDE. You can see this section of the code specifically takes in the GPS values and then creates an SD file name, opens it, and then begins writing to the file. Okay. Here's what the data looks like after we take it out of the SD card. See there's columns for temperature, humidity, pressure, luminance, UV indices, latitude, longitude, altitude, the PM, the particulate matter, all 3 sizes, the atmospheric particulate matter, and other associated particles. All right, for our exterior design, we wanted to have a good airflow to our PM 2.5 sensor. We wanted to have a shelf for extra mounting space, right? So there's like 2 platforms where electronic components can be mounted. We wanted to have easy to access inner components. We wanted to maximize interior space and have a hole for a camera, which eventually we did not include, but it was still helpful to have that opening. So starting on the left from a very basic sketch, right, on graph paper, actually John came up with this very clever design, which opens up into 3 different components, which latch together to form a very stable cube, but then can be easily removed to access the interior. So John could talk more about that.
Yeah, so we started with like some ideas with like messing around with polycarbonate sheets. However, since the enclosure is so small, we decided to use 3D printed parts. That greatly simplifies it because one piece could have multiple dimensions. So basically, it's only 3 parts and 6 screws make up the entire part. And with only 4 screws, you can remove this the L-shaped blue piece, and access basically the entire interior. And so 3D printed parts are weaker in one direction. However, we orient them in a way so that like all those directions kind of go different ways, and it actually can be quite strong.
Yeah, this is the final image of what the enclosure looks like. Okay, so we're briefly going to talk about Team Zimbabwe's prototyping work. They did a lot of the same things as us, where we both used the kit of parts provided by us. And however, we can see that like this is, we can see that they're actually using slightly different code, of course. They have their own implementation, and they managed to create like these sensors and these like basically dashboard to kind of track the values that they're having. I'd like to add that it was probably a lot harder for them to like get the resources they needed to actually code all this, because their internet connection and their just access to internet is a lot worse than what we are used to here in the US. But they also managed to get a working prototype and a fully functioning CubeSat for data collection. So after we have our working CubeSat prototype, we're ready to launch it. So we'll just talk about the Team USA launch a bit. As we already talked about, we're using a weather balloon. So what is a weather balloon? Well, they're very large and tough latex balloons that are able to fly long distances without popping while holding onto weights. So our balloon is a 300-gram weather balloon that can be inflated to about 8 feet in diameter. And it's made by this company called Cayman. You can see all the statistics here. So obviously you want to know like how high will this balloon fly? And there's basically 2 options to launch it. You can either tether your balloon to the ground with a rope, or you can let it go without a tether. So with a tether, obviously you would only reach the length of your tether, and usually at less than a kilometer, you can get a really, really long tether, but then it becomes difficult to reel back in. Untethered, your height depends solely on how much you inflate it. And as you can see, there's calculators you can use to determine when the balloon will travel high enough to where it pops. And you can calculate the burst altitude or the final altitude, where like the difference between the air pressures is enough to make the balloon pop. So we had to do a lot of preparation here. We made extensive use of like the calculations of these calculators to see like how far it's gonna fly, how much helium we need, and where it's gonna go. We also used this predictor to try to predict the estimated landing location of the balloon. And then we picked a day specifically to ensure the safe launch of the balloon, where there's no intense rain and no intense wind. It's hopefully a clear day and a nice area to launch a balloon. And I'd like to add that Team Zimbabwe during this time was also preparing to launch their balloon. Unfortunately, they didn't get a chance to launch it yet because they needed to talk to the meteorology department of Zimbabwe. Their like regulations require them to. Whereas in the US, like our regulations didn't require us to talk to anybody. We could just launch the balloon. So there's a lot of considerations to keep in mind. So when we were tethering our flight, we decided on doing this at first to provide initial data with little risk, because if it's untethered, obviously it's going to fly off. You need to retrieve it. If it's tethered, it's really easy to retrieve. You just reel in you just reel in the rope. So we tied the weather balloon to the ground with a spool, and Chambers did a calculation to figure out how much spool we need to reel in our balloon at the distance we wanted, which is about 1,000 feet. This is a video of our launch.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have liftoff.
So this is initially, you can see the balloon's kind of hanging in the air, and that's because we have an attachment with the tether, and we're just slowly letting some of the rope go. Later on, when we let it fly fully, we have this action video that's actually like recorded from the camera on the CubeSat. So let me just show you the first few seconds of the action video. So this is what the balloon sees, or what the camera on the CubeSat sees, as it's steadily climbing into the air. And as you can see, it's a really, really shaky flight. So it's important that the enclosure of our CubeSat is really, really strong and glad, so that it can like survive and all the equipment's safe. John did a really good job with designing the enclosure. Later on in the video, it sort of bobs at a set height because this is the highest I think our tether can go. And you can basically see a very shaky view of the entire surrounding area. Okay, so after we finish our untethered flight, we decided to do an untethered flight. So actually, during this launch session, we were planning to let the balloon go afterwards. However, our balloon popped. So we still don't know why that happened. It was probably because we were careless with handling the balloon. Some of our like oil from our hands got into it, and it caused like the rubber to weaken, and it popped. So instead of doing the untethered flight right in the same session, we had to wait to another session and do the untethered flight. But we managed to get done. So this is a parachute, I think. Do we want to talk about our plans for the parachute?
I can explain that now. So basically for untethered flight, we needed parachute to like obviously go down without breaking everything and without like becoming a dangerous object. So the parachute looks like that, like a big red thing. It's actually pretty hard to set. So there are 8 strings that go up to the parachute, and then there's 1 string that goes to the parachute release, and 1 string that goes to the balloon, and then 1 string that goes to the payload. And if any of the 8 parachute strings get tangled up in anything, then the parachute might not open, or might open like slanted, where it won't have as much stopping power. So we had to do a bunch of testing and a bunch of research on how to do this. And I guess you can see there, that's the final thing where the parachute, like us testing, just spinning around, and the parachute opened, and it opened fully. So on our like entire structure, it's like on the right, you can see it, there's the balloon on the top, then there's the parachute and the parachute release. So the parachute release will, when it detects that we're underneath like a certain altitude and that we're falling, then it will open up and let the parachute like unfold. And then beneath that, there is the radar reflector, and then at the bottom, there's the payload. And inside the payload, we need to add a bunch of like tracking devices, because like it's going to be really hard to find the payload after it lands somewhere often.
Oh geez, where'd I go? Okay, so
Okay,
wait, can we talk a little bit?
Yeah, this is the aeronautical chart. Okay, so this is another thing we have to consider when we do an untethered flight, is that the airspace. So you can see in Prosper, that's about where we launched from. And basically this tells us like which areas are have high population densities, and like which areas have controlled airspace and like stuff like that. Oh, and also where the nearest air traffic controller is, so we can call them.
Yeah, so we also used this calculator. We have a link to it. I think somewhere in the info docs, but it's the hub calculator that like gets the wind speeds in the surrounding area and tries to give you the predicted path to where it's gonna land. I think we can talk about this more like after we show you the launch video, but like it was helpful at first, but then we realized that this calculation was way off. So let's first show you the video of our untethered launch. Issue sound. Oh. Yeah, so this is where we launch our balloon into the air and it flies really far.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, so on launch day, we were all watching the balloon go away. It was very exciting to us. But then as we slowly watched the balloon disappear, we realized that like, well, first, our calculator that we were trying to use was like way off. It was just not even going in the right direction. So we couldn't rely on that at all. And then as the balloon got higher and higher away, we started losing like our GPS data. So initially we were planning to have like a GPS connected to the Arduino, and that would help us get the final location where it landed. But I guess it got too high and we stopped receiving GPS data, and then we were planning to get it again once it popped and landed on the ground, but it just never showed up for us. So we just had no way to recover this GPS data, and we couldn't we didn't end up being able to retrieve our balloon. So if you can see here, this is the actual path the balloon took. This is the GPS data it was sending. This is the GPS data we did manage to get, but it ends here at this like little red dot. And this is the very last time we received a signal from the CubeSat. So it probably landed around this region. We're not sure. And there's just no way to find out with our GPS lost. So it's a shame we couldn't manage to recover the balloon, but we did manage to get the data that it sent. So yeah, even though both our launches had a couple of setbacks, we were able to collect the data we needed. So we've got all this analytics. I think who's the one? Otto or John? Can you talk a little bit about these graphs?
All right, so this data was collected only from the tethered flight because, as Byron said, we unfortunately lost track of the balloon after its untethered flight. We still got some interesting data here. So you can see how this yellow line represents the height in meters. So it went up, and you can see it bobbing up and down due to the current and swirling of the air, and then we eventually brought it back down. And the pressure, it appears to change very little, but in fact, we noticed a full kilopascal of decrease as it went to the highest altitude. Over time, the temperature, these blue dots scattered downward, trended downward because we did it in the evening. And interestingly, we noticed that the humidity decreased as the balloon got higher, and the temperature increased as the balloon got higher. Now, as you know, if you get further and further higher, you expect the temperature to decrease as the height increases. But in fact, we saw the temperature increase. At the same time, the humidity was decreasing. And so we theorized that this was due to the effect of transpiration. Plants at the ground level releasing water into the lowest layers of the atmosphere, which had a cooling effect on the ground. And the CubeSat could observe how both the humidity and the temperature changed as it got further away from the ground and the plants on the ground. So what we can gather from this experiment, from this data, is that transpiration has an important role in cooling the immediate vicinity or the immediate ground level conditions, even if the temperature is higher a little bit further up in the atmosphere, which could be a powerful tool in combating global warming and the quality of life for people like us living at the ground level. This next graph shows the data from the smoke sensor or the particulate matter sensor. You see 3 different sizes of particles. Their concentrations are plotted on the y-axis, and the x-axis represents altitude. So you see at the lowest levels of altitude, there's a very great variation in particulate matter concentration. This could be due to a lot of things. This could be due to dust on the ground, plant matter floating through the air, allergens like pollen, and some level of pollution at the very ground level. But as we got higher and higher, we noticed, generally speaking, the particulate matter concentration was very comparatively low. So we concluded that, at least from our data, there was not a significant amount of diffusion of particulate matter into the atmosphere, the upper layers of the atmosphere. But of course, this was just one trial, and it would require more trials and more extensive study to get a more conclusive result. Next. So we learned many lessons from this. The GPS module, the BN220, was a bit difficult to program because the conventional software serial library did not work with the MKR that they provided us. So instead, we had to use the conventional serial port instead of overcomplicating things by creating our own special serial object, which in the end didn't work. And we also learned that weather balloon handling can be difficult. They can't withstand prolonged hot weather. And unfortunately, ours out there in that very hot field popped before we got a chance to launch it a second time. So if you ever plan to handle a weather balloon any other time in your life, make sure that you're in relatively moderate temperature conditions and just be careful. Are there any questions? All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Now we're going to have Max Fan from TechnicBots. Max Fan is a member of FTC Team 8565 TechnicBots, and he's the CAD lead on the team, and he is going to be doing an on-shape hands-on activity. So Max.
Max, can you check in audience? Do you have most people who responded? I just sent a broadcast message to the breakout room about this. Can you, maybe you need to give like a minute or two for people to respond coming back to the session if they plan to join this one.
Okay. All right, then we can just wait like a minute or two.
Can you check if the people who you, I don't know, the last few days you were.
There's like, yeah, there's like no one, almost no people that signed up. Like, there's only a handful of people that said they were going to come in
But are
this
they
room
here
right
now?
now. Okay. Okay. I guess we can just start then. All right. So in this lesson, we're just going to be introducing Onshape and just CAD in general. So just a little bit about me. My name is Max Pham. I'm an 11th grader at Lebanon Trail High School, and my hobbies are just playing tennis, reading, and playing video games. So today, or in this lesson, I'm just going to be introducing what CAD is. I'm going to talk a little bit about different CAD softwares, and I'm going to be going through a run through of Onshape, which I sent an email about last night. So if you received it, you should have installed it or created an account and should have been able to open it. And then finally, we're gonna end off with some practice. So just to start off with what CAD is, I'm just going to play this video, and which I think talks or introduces CAD really well.
Hello, it's Keith from Kinvert, and in this video we're going to be talking about what CAD stands for. CAD is Computer Aided Design, and that's basically what you're looking at here. This is CAD software, Computer Aided Design software. So what students will start off with is making relatively simple shapes. So for example, we could make a creeper shape by adding some feet down here, adding a body, and then we can smart scale this. So this is the main body here of the creeper. Oops. And then we grab that one. And then we bring it like this. Add another cube over here.
Okay, actually, because I think this might take a while, or just 2 minutes, I'm just gonna condense it down into a few sentences. So CAD stands for Computer Aided Design, and it's kind of self-explanatory from its name. And or CAD is just using computers to help, let's say, like create, modify, or optimize any 3D objects or designs that you might want to create. Like for example, this person in the video is creating a creeper from Minecraft, and that's an example of CAD. And CAD is just a really good way of increasing productivity because in the past, people would always just have to draw designs on paper, and they would have to draw 3 different angles to show what each direction or every plane of their design looked like. But with CAD, you can create a 3D model with much less time and just much more efficiently than we ever could before.
Hello, it's Keith from
Okay, so here are some different CAD softwares that we have, or my team has worked with, or at least interacted in the past before. If you search up CAD softwares on like Google, for example, you can probably just find all of these in a list and much more. This is a table of CAD system comparisons and just like of our experiences with them. So over here on the right, you can see Onshape. That's what we're going to be teaching you today. But our team uses Autodesk Fusion 360, and we use this because it's cloud-based, which means that anything that any model that one person edits, another person on our team can access that model. And it's an advanced version of a CAD software. So it's not only good for beginners, but it's also really good for experienced CAD people. It's really easy to use. I think the user interface is really clean, and the only downside that I can think of is that it uses a lot of CPU for larger models. So if you have like or a less powerful laptop or a computer, Autodesk might not be the best option. But Onshape, on the other hand, it's really easy to use. It's good for beginners. It's sort of cloud-based. So the way Onshape works is that you can create these folders and share them with people, but they can't go directly into the file and edit them. You have to download the model and then you would have to import that into your own Onshape account, and then you could edit it from there. The only downside from Onshape other than that is that it's sort of clunky and it's not really the best. It doesn't really have the best UI, and it's really difficult to do things where in other software such as Fusion 360 would be much simpler to do. So now I'm going to go through a UI tour of Onshape. And so if you went through the PDF that I sent, this should look sort of familiar. This is just the, I guess, home screen of Onshape. So on the left, you have the My Onshape, which means that when you click on that, it just brings up all your files and your last opened by yourself. There's your Create tab at the top left, and if you click on that, you can create a document, a folder. You can import files and also just import from other services. Your next tabs are recently opened. It's kind of self-explanatory. Those are just the most recent files that you've opened. The Created by Me, that shows all of the files that you have created, and your Shared with Me gives you all the documents and folders that other people have shared with you. Public, these are just files on the internet that other people have published, and you can just go into these and search them up in the search bar up here and then download them, or you can even publish your own models once you finish them. And then of course you have your trash folder where you can delete any folders or files that you don't want. So now I'm going to give a demonstration just on how to use Onshape. So after creating Create, you can click on a document, which will create a file for you, and then you can name it anything. For this, I'll just name mine Test, and it'll open up this different screen where you can start creating and modeling. So to move around, where you can see that I'm moving the camera angle and just moving the origin from side to side. To turn around, if you have a mouse, then the default would be Alt and then your scroll wheel. So click on your scroll wheel, and then you can drag your mouse around after that. To move your origin from side to side, you would go Control and then click on your scroll wheel, and then you can move your mouse and it'll move side to side, up and down. To zoom in or out, you can either click Shift and then hold the middle mouse button and just move your mouse up and down to zoom in or out. Or if you have the middle mouse button, then you can also just scroll it, and that'll just zoom in or zoom out. Now I'm going to talk about how to create these 3D objects that is at the basis of every 3D model. So in Onshape, you would have to go to Sketch at the top left, and you can see that there is a blue box surrounding Sketch plane. That means that it's waiting for you to select one of these 3 planes, either the front plane, the top plane, or the side plane. And I'm just going to select top plane. From there, you can see that at the very top of your tools, that they all changed. And all these tools are made for creating or editing the objects that you create. So the only objects or the only shapes that Onshape gives you are rectangle and circle. It also gives you some other ones like arcs and like different polygons. But for the most part, you would just use the line tool to make your irregular shapes. So to just start off, I'll just give you an example of how to make your shape 3D. So you can choose like either line, rectangle, or circle. I'll just choose rectangle, and you would click anywhere on the plane that you chose. And you can see when I drag my mouse out that it also drags the shape of the rectangle out. This is just one way to change the dimensions. You can also see on the length and width of the rectangle, you can see the actual dimensions of the rectangle, and you can change those later. But for now, when I want to set my rectangle down, I can just left click again, and you can see that it creates a 2D rectangle. But since we're trying to make 3D models here, we want to sort of extrude it out or just make it 3D. And to do that, we can just click the check mark here or enter, and that'll bring us back to the normal page. From there, at the very top left, right next to sketch, there is an extrude button. You can click that or Shift E, which is the hotkey, as you can see when I hover over it, and then click on your 2D shape that you just made. From there, you can see that there's sort of a blue outline of rectangular prism, and that's just what we want. So that's pretty much just how to extrude it. If you want to adjust the height of this, then you can always just click on the arrow and bring it up or down depending on just what height you want. You can also see that over here where it says depth, that's also another way to change it. So say I wanted 2 inches instead. If I click 2 and enter, then you can see that it changes the model as well. And once I think that it's good, then I can just click the check mark. So another thing to know is, so say I want to cut into this, or I want to extrude it out again. That would be just really easy. You can just go back to extrude here, click that, click on any of the faces here. Just say that. And you can see that there is another translucent rectangular prism. And from there, I can move it up to add it, or if I wanted to move it down, then I could also move it down. And you can see that when I do that, there's an error message that says Boolean resulted in no geometric change. That's because I am still technically adding to it. So even if I bring it down, there's nothing to change because I'm just adding more to what's already there. So instead, if I wanted to remove it, I could go over here to remove, and you can see that now it says selected tools and targets do not intersect. And that's because what this red rectangular prism is covering, there's like no objects there, so there's nothing for it to remove. So then I could just drag the arrow down and it would remove what was already created there. And same as before, I can also just change the height next to depth. So say like 0.5 inches, and I could just click check. So there are, as you can see in the toolbar, there's like a bunch of different tools that you can use. Most of them don't really matter. They're usually just for finer details, but some of them do make editing models slightly easier. For example, there is the hole button, and as the name suggests, if you click on it and choose a face, then you can make a hole through it. Or for example, shell. This is similar to hole, but instead of creating a hole, you can see that when I click on a face, it removes basically everything except for the sides. And I can choose or change the side thickness through this, I guess, text here. And I can just change it to say 0.5 inches, for example. And you can see just how much that changed. And if I'm okay with that, I can just click the check mark. And then I'll just create another sketch just as another example for this. So I would choose another face or plane. I would choose a shape and circle. I would choose a starting point, choose an endpoint, click check, and then I would extrude that out to make it 3D. Okay, now I'm going to talk about this outline here on the left. So this is called an outline. It's pretty standard in any 3D modeling software. This is always going to be there. It always gives you the origin, as you can see here, which is just the center of your design. It also gives you the 3 planes that you can see. And it also gives you the history of every action that you've done in this design. So you can see that it shows the extrudes I've made, the shells, and also the sketches. And right below that, you can see there are part 1 and part 2. You can see that when I click on them, it also highlights the shapes that I've created on or in the design. And part 1 is just the rectangular prism that I've made, and part 2 is the cylinder that I've made. And these are just the names that Onshape automatically assigns to 3D or custom parts that you make. And to change that, you can just right click and rename. This will make finding your 3D objects much easier and allow you to edit them much faster later on. So I could just name it to rectangular prism, and this one to just cylinder. Now, just as I said before, you can see all the edits that you've made, but say you wanted to change one of, like, say I wanted to change the height of the cylinder, but I could just go to extrude and reduce the height there. But another way I can do that is by going to the history, double clicking on the extrude and changing the depth of the height. So you can see that it's currently at 1.66 inches, but I can also just change that to say 1 inch. And you can see that it changes that. And once I click check, you can see that it also automatically makes that onto the design. So now I'm going to teach you how to move objects, because in Onshape, it's slightly different than other 3D modeling softwares. And this is just one of the things where I said that it was just a little clunky. So if I want to move it, then I can select the part here. And then from there, you can see that there is a little transform button in the middle here. It kind of looks like 2 blocks and just 2 arrows showing that it's moving from one place to another. And you can just click that. So now you can see that transform, and you can see that there's a drop-down box here. And right now it says transform by line. But what's best in this case, I would say, is translate by distance or translate by XYZ. So for example, just translate by distance. It kind of means what it says. It changes the distance by whatever you want it to. So say I chose -2, then oh, I guess that has to be positive. Okay, so say I wanted to change it 5 inches, then it would move 5 inches. But I would also have to set the direction. And by doing that, I would have to select, as it says here, 2 vertices, an edge, a plane, or a cylindrical face. So for example, if I just wanted to move it up, I could select the face of the cylinder. And you can see that it moved 5 inches in the Z direction. But if I wanted to make it go up, then I could select the top face, and you can see that it goes up as well. Another way to translate is translate by XYZ. And this way I think is the most efficient, because you can just use arrows and you can see, or you can manually make it into any way you want it to. The last type of translation that it's pretty important is the rotate. And that's sort of just what it means to rotate it. And just like in the translate by distance, you have to select, I guess, such like points where it rotates. So if I select like the top face here, I could change the angle to say 60. And you can see that it does nothing. And that's because in Onshape, you also have to create a reference point for where it rotates. So not only do I have to select the edge of the cylinder, I also have to select the edge of another part. So if I selected the edge of this rectangular prism, I can make the cylinder move. And I can also just use this arrow to change just how much it rotates. And as just like with everything, I can also change it in this text box here. So it's just like 80 degrees, and then I can click check. So that's pretty much all the basics of 3D modeling in Onshape. Another thing that's just a little fun thing if you want to do is you can change the colors in or of your objects. And to do that, you just click on one of your objects, right click, and then over here where it says edit appearance, it gives you a bunch of different colors. So if I wanted like a red or a blue, I can just choose that and click check. So that's just a really brief rundown of how to use Onshape. So now if there are no questions, which I'm pretty sure there will be, I want everyone to try and create the first logo. So this is what it looks like, and this is just what I made in like 5 minutes. So it doesn't really have to be that precise. It's just a little something to get you more familiar and doing some hands-on stuff with Onshape. So just practice that. And if you guys have any questions about it, you guys can just put it in the chat. So I see that Arush asked if it was better to be in millimeters or inches. It's really up to you. I use inches mainly just because that's what I started with, but occasionally I do use millimeters because when I 3D print stuff for a team, the software that I use to 3D print stuff, it automatically reduces everything to millimeters. So I could either just scale it up in the software, or I could just edit the model in millimeters and I wouldn't have to do anything. Specifically for FTC, I mean, yeah, it's really just a personal preference. As long as all the objects that you're editing, or okay, so take this for example. So in when I create the robots, or when I put together all the pieces for our robot game, or of our robot, our builders usually create all the subsystems, and then I put them all together. And if someone was working on like a custom part in millimeters, and the parts that other people were making in inches, then that would create some, I guess, problems. And you could just scale it. Like, there is a way to scale it in Onshape and in the software that our team uses. But it's really just up to the person and whatever they prefer.
Okay, thank you, Max. So we're gonna have our final drawing now. So if Ellen wants to share her screen.
Okay, so we have 5 participants left in the session so far. Hey, congratulations, Ariane, Team Nicaragua. You can private message Melody your email and information so we can figure out how to get the gift card to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you guys for coming, and we hope you had a fun time at our workshop.